Chapter 212. These people were a little pretentious. He always felt that if he excelled in his studies, he would look down on this and that. He even felt that he was very righteous. No matter how good Fujio was or how handsome she was, if she didn't have good grades, they would still be against her. His expression was one of "I just don't like you." Nobody actually cared whether they liked it or not. Everything was because they thought they were very important. So even when looking at the results, they would put on an arrogant face. After they saw their own results, they looked at the last place, so that they could find another chance to mock those who liked Fujio. But he couldn't find it. They counted from the back to the front, but they couldn't find the name that they thought would appear. Instead, when he raised his head, the most eye-catching thing was the youth's photo. That group of people's expressions changed. This year, the first place in the whole grade had an unbelievable result, and they had all heard about it from their teachers. But they didn't expect that the unbelievable person was actually Fujio, the Fujio that they thought was trash. In an instant, this news blew up in the school hunk selection thread. Who said that Our Highness Gyo only has looks? Look at this score. Holy sh*t, how did you get full marks in your English test? What an amazing score. Number 1 middle school is really amazing. On the campus forum, there were not only students from the same school, but also students from other schools. Those who liked Fujio were proud that His Highness Gyo had received more praises. However, there were still people who sneered. This kind of results might have been copied. What's there to be proud of? He still doesn't know anything. If I were to say that the school hunk should be Almighty Chin, have you all forgotten about Almighty Chin? Almighty Chin is no longer on campus. At least find someone like Almighty Chin. What's so special about this Fujio? Compared to Almighty Chin, it was like heaven and earth. To the one above, please don't compare the two. I like Almighty Chin too. I believe that with Almighty Chin's character, he wouldn't want to see anyone step on another person when they like him. He step on? Is Fujio worth stepping on? You even deleted my comment? It's useless even if I delete it. What I said is the truth. A gay wants to be the school hunk. Those who like Fujio are all crazy. If you ask me, only Fu Shiming from our class deserves the title of the new school hunk. Do you know how awesome he is? Not to mention his exam results. He was a god-level character and hero. Like Almighty Chin, he was a professional player. On the list of the esports selection contest this time, he was the captain of the team. Just the number of god-level players under him was uncountable. Only this kind of person is worthy of being the school hunk, okay? It's just that he's more low-key, unlike Your Highness Gyo, who just got a little better in the exam, and still has to make it known everywhere. I just chuckle. Shui Yaoyao came to find Fujio today, because she wanted His Highness Gyo to take a look at the posts about her on the forum. It was supposed to be a happy thing, but she didn't expect that things would turn out this way. Even if the other party wanted to flatter Fu Shiming, there was no need to say such things about His Highness Gyo, right? Her fingers moved angrily, and she was about to type a reply. Chapter 213. Shui Yaoyao looked up and stared blankly at the excessively handsome young man in front of her. Fujio chuckled and continued. Don't forget, our goal is to dominate the entire selection contest. It was because of the young man's devilishly handsome attitude that made people's blood boil with excitement. In the beginning, she played hero because she wanted to find some friendliness and comfort in the game world that she couldn't find in real life. But now, she not only found it, but also learned to fight and be strong. This was a battlefield. If His Highness Gyo was the king, then they were his loyal knights. Every one of us would tell ourselves that. If I were strong enough, I would face humiliation and ridicule, and I would say loudly, no. This competition was not just a simple game. They had to fight for their dignity. Would tomorrow, when people found out about His Highness Gyo and Spade Z's identity, they wouldn't look at her in such a strange way? The night before the competition, there were bound to be people who couldn't sleep well. Shui Yaoyao was the first. After she finished a math problem, she forced herself to go to bed early, but she couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tossed and turned. Finally, she sat up and started to study the technique Fujio taught her. Feng Shang was also in the same state. He sat in front of the computer, But he didn't play any games. He just looked at the game character on the screen, and then he glanced sideways at the place on the calendar that was heavily circled with a red circle. Being a professional player, that was something he didn't even dare to dream of before. Feng Shang lowered his head and clenched the mouse in his hand. Without his glasses, he was really too handsome. People were still playing games in the internet cafe, and Hero's page was hanging high up on the screen. Someone knocked on the counter. Boss. Hi, boss. What are you doing? Give me a Coke. Yin Weiyao didn't say anything. With a cigarette in his mouth, he handed over the Coke. That person touched his chin and asked, "What's wrong with the boss today?" "I don't know. He looks different from usual. And I heard that the internet cafe will be locked at 10:30 today." "Damn. So early. I was going to pull an all-nighter. I've never seen an internet cafe that doesn't open at night. Our boss is so capricious." Yin Weiyao flicked the cigarette butt. "What are you talking about? Brats, pack up and get ready to close." "Are you really going to close the door?" "No, boss uncle." "Where are you planning to go? Aren't you going to open the internet cafe?" Yin Weiyao paused, taking his jacket and flinging it over his shoulder. "Uncle, I'm going back to my old profession, playing in the professional league." Yin Weiyao walked out of the internet cafe after saying that, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people. "Did you hear that? The boss said he was going to play in the professional league." Could the boss be joking? At his age, it's unlikely. It was too cold outside the internet cafe. Yin Weiyao started to regret running out on impulse. He wasn't young anymore. In the words of a child, his hand speed and eyesight had long since fallen behind in a professional team. Why was a 30-year-old uncle still jumping around? However, his body couldn't help but reignite that hot blood in his body. Chapter 214. This reminded Yin Weiyao of the earliest times when he played Hero. At that time, many people who played games were not understood. It wasn't like now, where a great god would be sought after by everyone. In the past 6 years, in the eyes of most people, anyone who had anything to do with computers was a loafer. Esports would always be rejected in China. Therefore, whether it was his relatives or classmates, the first thing they saw when they mentioned that he worked in the game industry was subtle disdain. Playing games can also earn money. Spending money is more like it. Such a person is a glutton and lazy person. He won't have much success in the future. Yin Weiyao sat on the railing outside the internet cafe, cocking his head and lighting a cigarette. Even he himself did not understand why he would think of something so long ago today. How many people say, he is not practical. He gritted his teeth and persevered. He thought that one day, he would prove to everyone that what he was doing was called esports, and not just a game. Finally, he entered a pro team. He thought that he could finally shine. However, in just half a year, in the short span of half a year, all of his passion for this industry had been obliterated. It turned out that you didn't have to play the game well to make a name for yourself. How to promote, whether or not your agent will support you, the competition between people in the same industry, and the betrayal of your closest comrades in order to steal fans. Yin Weiyao stubbed out the cigarette in his hand. Just as he was about to enter, his phone screen lit up. It was a message from their temporary team's WeChat group. 999 brand lollipop. Can't you all sleep? Come out, I have gifts for you. What a child, a high school student. Yin Weiyao snorted, but his lips curled into a smile. With a cigarette in his mouth, he put on his hat and ran towards the address that the youth had sent to the group. There weren't many cars on the road at night. Especially in the north like Rivertown, the colder it was, the fewer people there were. However, for some reason, his chest and palms were burning hot. Feng Shang put on his coat and left. Shui Yaoyao also left at the same time. It was as if no matter how dark or cold it was outside, at that moment, even their eyes were bright. And what attracted them was the young man standing in the empty square of Chang'an Street. That tall and slender, his back straight wearing a black leather jacket and short silver hair. He leaned against a pure black Land Rover. After 11 o'clock in the evening, there were not so many cars on Chang'an Street. Therefore, even the sound of breathing while running could be heard clearly. Shui Yaoyao took the last train while Feng Shang drove, and Yin Wuyao took a taxi. The three of them came from the north, south and east respectively. He didn't know if it was because he was running too fast, or because of the figure that emitted light even under the night sky. His heart was beating so fast that it felt a little tight. That kind of feeling didn't only occur when one was in love or missing someone. And it was now that they saw their companions and smiled at each other. Fujio smiled as well. She walked over from the other side and raised her hand. The trunk and car lights were turned on at the same time. Under the dazzling light, all the rose petals that were pressed against the back of the car gushed out, just like a scene from a comic. Both Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang were stunned when they saw this. It seemed to be the most beautiful scene they had ever seen. Chapter 215. Team Uniform. Shui Yaoyao never thought that His Highness Jiu would give them this as a gift. When she turned her head to look, even the handsome Uncle Yin Wuyao's eyes changed when he saw the uniform in his hands. Needless to say, Feng Shang's fingers trembled when he touched the fabric in his hands. He had seen too many players trained by his brother. Every time he watched a professional league match, he would think that those people were so handsome when they sat in front of the computer in their uniforms, typing on the keyboard and waving the mouse. If he didn't stutter, his life might not be like this. But it was inevitable that he felt inferior. In fact, before he met his idol, he was afraid to communicate with others. When Feng Shang thought of this, he raised his eyes and looked at the smiling young man with his hands in his trouser pockets. Fujio looked back at him. She raised her hand and put on the uniform that belonged to her. The quality of the uniform was very good, and it was obviously custom-made. The smooth lines slid down the shoulders, and with that handsome and fair face, she looked cool and noble. Shui Yaoyao and Yin Wuyao looked at each other and pulled up the zipper. For people of different heights, all wearing the same uniform, stood in the middle of the square. Their feet stepped on the car lights, and the rose petals didn't fall for a long time. The next day, all kinds of news about the selection contest swept across the internet. Even if there was no news, there was still some news. After all, this was the most anticipated competition for everyone who played Hero. People who didn't play games wouldn't understand what it meant to change from a non-professional player to a professional player. What's more, the person standing on the top floor waiting for the new contestants was none other than the most valuable professional player in the esports world. Qin Mo. Just hearing his name could make people's blood boil. Not to mention that Almighty Qin would be on camera the whole time. In the words of the media, this was the era of all-stars. The popularity of a professional team was no less than that of some actors, and it could even create an extraordinary amount of discussion. One of the live streaming platforms had already broken 10 million online users in the morning. Each of them had their own team that they supported, and the big clubs had sent out messages in advance about who would participate in the competition. On this day, the internet cafe was unusually quiet. Everyone was holding a beer or Coke, looking up at the big screen in front of them. The tickets for the selection contest had been on sale since a week ago, and the price was getting more and more expensive day by day. Until today, there were still people who wanted to buy tickets. The reason why these people were like this was because they were all waiting for the same scene: the members of the various battle teams entering the arena. Such a grand competition guaranteed absolute viewership ratings. The media had already picked up their cameras, and the staff at the venue were making hand signals. In the middle of the venue, there were rows of computers. They were all made of top-notch equipment, and even the headphones hanging on them were black in color. The scene was no less than a star-studded movie. Sound engineer in position, lighting technician in position, commentator in position. Okay, all teams get ready. The countdown begins. The chief director of the competition, dressed in a black cotton-padded jacket, stood in the darkest corner, holding a loudspeaker in his hand. 3. When the director shouted 2, Fujio, who was standing in the tunnel on the far right, tilted her head. Her side profile was handsome, and her gaze was cool. Are you ready? The three nodded in unison. Chapter 216. Bang! Lights gathered. Everyone sitting in the audience stands stood up and looked at the home court. 12 teams entered the arena. For people for one team, there were a total of 48. There were both men and women in the team. The women were usually very young, and their average age was no more than 92 years old. And the tougher the character in the game, the sweeter the character was, the sweeter the player was. This was the contrast of cuteness that the star-making team emphasized. To be honest, when there was a girl on stage, the first person people saw was a girl. But today, their gazes involuntarily landed on the silver-haired youth. There were girls in the audience, and they almost fell for him at first glance. Who is that? He's so handsome. I don't know. I've never seen him before. Such a handsome person has never been on a live broadcast? This doesn't make sense. What about his team? Do you recognize him from his clothes? I've never seen him before. Not only the female audience, but even the director couldn't help but give the young man a close-up. Not because of anything else, but because of the evil smile on his face. Give this guy more screen time. If this kid plays well, he will definitely become famous. The people backstage were still working. Fujio had a lollipop in her mouth and one hand in her pocket. She led her team to the registration counter. The whole competition would be broadcasted live, and the game name would be shown to all the hero fans in the country. Both He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong followed her out of the country as agents, but they were not at ease. They were afraid that Fujio couldn't accept failure, so before she came out they set on the way. Jio, this competition is just for fun. The most important thing is to participate. Winning or losing isn't important. The most important thing is that you are happy. Chen Xiaodong's way of comforting people was always different from others. Young Master Qin has already accepted you. It doesn't matter even if you are not so addicted to games. People who have slept with you are always better at sleeping with you. Don't worry, no matter whether you win or lose, I will never tell Madam that you are participating for young Master Qin. Fujio glanced at him and hooked his neck with her left hand. Lose? Your young master never loses, understand? He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong didn't say anything else. In their hearts, they only treated Fujio as a child and asked him to go out and explore the world. They had seen those team members before. One blushed as soon as he saw them, and another blushed even when he had a cigarette in his mouth. The only girl was even more likable. But these four people, did they really understand the meaning of the esports selection contest? Besides, Spadesy was definitely not going to appear. He Honghua glanced at the entrance of the passageway again, and finally set her eyes on the young man, who had caught everyone's attention the moment he appeared. Although He Honghua knew that they were just fooling around, she still couldn't help but clench her fists and whisper, "Jio, you can do it." He hoped that these children could win. Even if they could only win one match, at least they wouldn't have any regrets. Chapter 217. However, the Fu family's team members, who were also causing a sensation, frowned heavily when they saw Fujio. What's going on? Why is this trash calling for a competition? He Honghua probably couldn't find anyone to join her team, so she found a few random players from somewhere and formed a team. Even if she wants to form a team, she doesn't need to find this trash. Those guys are not bad looking, but they are too arrogant. That wasn't enough. He purposely stood in front of Fujio, raised his eyebrows, and smiled with obvious disdain. I didn't expect that someone would still dare to show off after what happened to him. It seems like he hasn't been beaten into submission yet. He must have forgotten how he begged for mercy in school. Otherwise, he would be scared out of his wits. Isn't that right, young Master Fu? As he spoke, he turned to look behind him. Fu Ximing was the prettiest among them, but his little face was still as arrogant as ever. He pretended to be cold as he glanced at Fujio, as if he didn't care about anyone. Why are you talking so much to a layman? Go write your game name, and get on the computer. Young Master Fu is right. There's really nothing to talk about with a layman. Apart from Fu Ximing, 2 of the contestants sent by the Fu family were poached from He Honghua's side. Now it was one of them who answered. Yin Wuyao was a hot-tempered person, and he wanted to beat Fujio up the moment he heard that. Fujio raised her hand and grabbed his wrist. She looked at Fu Ximing and said in a light voice, "Beaten into submission? The one beaten into submission should be the classmate you sent, right? Why? Didn't your young master Fu tell you how I slapped him in the face with the phone? As soon as Fu Ximing heard that, his expression turned ugly. The more Fu Jiu behaved like this, the more embarrassed he felt when he recalled what happened that day. The other three didn't know what was going on. Then they heard Fu Ximing say coldly, "He can only show off for now. When the competition starts, you can fight him however you want. Now let's go." The Fu family had invited a reporter they were close to. Fu Ximing led his team to the registration area and was immediately surrounded by the media. These were all included in the content of the live broadcast. The difference was that this wasn't a stage, so there would be other interviews during the registration. Yin Wuyao looked at the backs of those people and was still unhappy. His thin lips twitched. Who is that kid? So arrogant? No wonder old Yao doesn't know. He's still young. When you were playing in the team, he was still drinking milk. Fu Jiu looked sideways and curled up the corner of her mouth. How is it? Seeing such a person who deserves to be beaten up, will it motivate you? Yin Wuyao tilted his head. Very capable. Then go write your name. Fu Jiu walked over. The people on Fu Ximing's side saw this and mocked them. How many people would know a wild army's name in the game? Even if it was written, it would be placed at the end of the competition, and it wouldn't get any screen time. The esports selection contest was different from other competitions. Revealing the game name was also a unique attraction of the competition system. Who were the gods that they were familiar with in the game? Chapter 218. Many people had already stretched their necks, staring at the name and the corresponding contestant on the screen. That kind of excitement and agitation was indescribable. The people waiting to watch in the internet cafe clenched the can of Coke in their hands, just to see what the Almighty in their hearts looked like in real life. The most important thing was, Spade Z was very likely to be among them. A large part of the reason why there were no empty seats was because there were too many anti-fans, and every single one of them was waiting for Spade Z to show up. The media that the Fu family had invited also focused all their attention on Fu Ximing. Even manager Feng from the Qin Group Club was staring at those professional teams. Plus, there were too many people, so he didn't see Feng Shang. The main reason was that Feng Yi never thought that his brother, who liked to stay at home, would appear in the professional arena. After all, Feng Yi had wanted to bring him here before, but Feng Shang never came. He just watched the live broadcast. In other words, other than He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong, no one's eyes were on the He family army. No, there was one more person. He stood at the top of the arena, wearing a pure black uniform on his shoulders and a pure white shirt inside. His deep eyes looked down at the ground, and his handsome and noble face was as cold as ever. And the people below couldn't see him. Only when the video was being broadcasted did the camera switch, and the face that could make people scream was transmitted to various live streaming platforms through the video. Almighty Qin. Oh my God, it's really Almighty Qin. I feel that Almighty Qin has become more handsome in just a few days. Is it my illusion? It's not your imagination. Almighty Qin is getting more handsome every day. But what is he looking at? I feel like he's looking at the registration. He must be looking at me. You know, Almighty Qin has high hopes for me. I'm drunk, don't think too much, okay? Wait a minute, Almighty Qin is really looking at people. How is that possible? Why not? Almighty Qin and Spade Z are often together in the game. Is Almighty Qin looking for Spade Z in the crowd to see what he looks like in person? You mean live game meetup? Looks like it. It was said that Qin Mo's existence was to witness the existence of the pinnacle of esports. In less than a minute, he had set off a wave of clicks. In just 3 minutes, the number of users on the platform had more than doubled. The media was also prepared to take advantage of this period to create another hot topic. As a result, most of the cameras were pointed at Fu Ximing's team. But at this moment, on the other side, which made people think that it was just a wild army, there was a sudden sound, and the whole screen exploded in red. Everyone couldn't help but look back in shock. On the screen was a player named North of Een Mountain, one of the top 5 players in the country. That's right, top 5. People who just started playing Hero might not recognize this name. But all the veteran players who had played for 3 years wanted to take another look at the screen in the middle of the game. After confirming that there was no mistake, the venue fell silent for a second, followed by a shout that came from the chest. Peking University. It really was Peking University. Damn, what should I do? My eyes are red. My favorite pro player is back. Luckily, I didn't give up. I knew that Peking University would definitely come back. Chapter 219. As such an unexpected name suddenly popped out, the reporters at the scene were momentarily stunned. Fu Ximing and the others didn't know what happened. North of Een Mountain? Who was that? At this time, it was time for the commentator to come on. The commentator usually played Hero professionally, so of course he was good at crowd control. I'm sure everyone is curious about who North of Een Mountain is. 5 years ago, when Hero wasn't as popular as it was now, a cute kid like me clicked open a video of a national ranking tournament. I still remember that ranking tournament to this day. It was because I saw that person play that I decided to become a professional gamer. That person was none other than North of Een Mountain. But later, for some unknown reason, Peking University left the esports scene, and the name North of the Mountain never lit up again. I believe that there are many people who feel the same way as me. The one we've been waiting for has finally returned. At the end, the commentator's voice was a bit hoarse. At that moment, some of the people in front of their computers froze. They were not the only ones whose eyes had turned red because of a name. They had only occasionally thought of watching another league match, but their eyes had turned red because of one name. In this world, there will always be such a person. On him, all the memories of your youth are recorded. Even if you get married, have children, and gradually become one of the many people in the world. But when you see that person, you will remember the past that made your blood boil, and your eyes light up. North of Een Mountain. That's the kind of person. The crowd was almost out of control. Fortunately, the other commentator joined the industry late. He wiped his partner's face, and turned his head to the microphone. He's crying. What should we do? F***CK. I'm not crying. You say you're not crying? Your eyes are red like a rabbit's. Who arranged for you to commentate with me? Didn't you say that since we play together and commentate together, I'm actually in a difficult position? Shut up. Then don't cry. I'll buy you some candy. Listening to those words, not only did the director want to hold his forehead, but even manager Feng dragged his assistant over. Who let them go on stage to explain? Feng, CEO Feng, have you forgotten? You said that the two of them look like a couple. Now the audience likes to watch them bicker. The most important thing is that the two of them appear together. The click rate is high. Manager Feng took a deep breath. Tell them to leave their love for each other at home. What's important now is, who is North of Een Mountain? Just now, all the cameras were aimed at Fu Ximing's team. They were waiting for them to reveal something, so they didn't move their cameras. Now that he thought about it, the explosion seemed to have come from the west. In other words, he had only heard the sound, and did not see who logged in with the name, North of Een Mountain. Fortunately, there were technicians. With a single adjustment, they locked onto the positions of the battle team members who had logged in. Number 31, He Family Army Een Wuyao. He Family Army? How could this be? Chapter 220. Chen Xiaodong was also shocked, and the shocked expression on his face was very obvious. So the person young master found, was this good? The people on Fu Ximing's side all opened their eyes wide. They never thought that there would be such a person in that wild army. Fu Ximing's expression changed, and then he said casually, there's nothing strange about this. It's normal for He Honghua to spend money to find a master to shock the scene. As for the others, how can they be so good if they play with Fujio? However, just as Fu Ximing finished speaking, another light exploded on the He Family Army's side. Awarding you a slap of pleasure, popular player, Glory Zone C, ranked top 7 in the country. Anyone who played Hero would know this ID. This person was not only well equipped, but he was also a top-notch almighty in ranked matches. Almost in an instant, The sound of discussion swept through the entire arena like a tide. Holy sh*t. Who the hell is this he family army? This player's ranking is too amazing. More than amazing. They're practically poaching the entire Almighty in the hero ranking. To be honest, I thought they were just a small amateur team. I didn't expect them to be so good. How come they didn't even dig up their background? Why didn't they even dig out their background? The media friends were almost crying, okay. Our friends from the media are also close to crying, alright. How could they have imagined that a temporary team, that should not have appeared in front of the cameras, would be able to shock the entire audience? Someone was even yelling, "Follow Big Brother, I'll beat you and take you to the skies." These words were all for Feng Shang. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the awarding you a slap of pleasure in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. After all, they sometimes played ranked matches in the game, and they had fought against each other before. The other's skills and dialogue were too different from his. Wasn't this the real cuteness? Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the awarding you a slap of pleasure in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. His left hand, which was about to give out orders, suddenly stopped. This scene was something that almost no one had expected. First, the Almighty who disappeared 5 years ago came back. Then it was the R&B Almighty on the super popular rankings. Both of them were from the same team, the He Family Army. This was a team that no one present had ever heard of before. However, the two people were indeed sitting there, and the computer screen was still emitting a faint blue light, which proved that this matter was true. This time, the director gave the order to change the position of the camera. The member of the Fu family, who was about to log into his account to show the video, stopped in midair with an ashen face. They were the most anticipated battle team, but their popularity couldn't compare to a wild team that had appeared out of nowhere. That kind of scene was undoubtedly the most awkward. His face was burning with pain. However, both the audience and the audience outside the arena no longer cared about the Fu's battle team. At this time, almost everyone had the same question in their minds. To be able to gather these two great experts, the captain of this team was definitely not simple. What would his online ID be? Clatter. The faint sound of typing could be heard. Chapter 221. Ei Black. Her fair hands were on the keyboard, and her fingers moved at a surprisingly fast speed. Together with the handsome and evil silver hair of the young man, he was unspeakably cool. Before people could see how the young man was typing, 3 big words appeared on the big screen in the center. Spade Z. Instantly, Honghua choked. Her mouth was wide open, and she couldn't say a word. She stared blankly at the scene in front of her, and even her black pupils were shocked. Chen Xiaodong's reaction was even more direct, and the support stick in his hand fell to the ground. Spade. Spade Z? His young master was Spade Z. That great god Spade Z who wiped out the whole server. How could this be? Young master was clearly a gamer, who didn't even know how to choose a character. Although young master had been working hard recently to chase after young master Qin, locking himself in his room every day to play hero. But how could he be Spade Z? Chen Xiaodong glanced at the silver-haired young man, sitting in front of the computer again, and even his fingers began to tremble. He couldn't tell what he was feeling at that moment. Excitement, shock, or disbelief. He couldn't believe it, but the audience gave the most direct reaction. Swoosh. Everyone in the audience stood up. Not only that, but the number of clicks on the online platform soared to the highest point because of the appearance of this game ID. The noise in the internet cafe almost blew the roof off. Everyone clenched the can of cola in their hands, and their eyes were shaking as they looked at the screen. Spade Z. That was Spade Z. Because the reaction was too big, the recorder had to stand up to maintain order. Quiet down. The game account hasn't been logged in yet. Everyone quiet down. How could they be quiet? That was their Big Spade. The rookie king Big Spade who swept the FC in Zone C. In fact, they didn't have much hope for the appearance of their Prince Charming. The media also said that the reason why Spadesy was so mysterious was probably because he was ugly and unpresentable. Those words weren't very nice. But now, just by looking at that face, passers-by would become his fans. Too handsome, too young. Especially when the lollipop was in her mouth and her eyes were lowered as she typed, her thick eyelashes casting a faint shadow under her eyelids. His messy silver hair matched with his black and white combat uniform didn't make him look decadent. Instead, he looked impeccably handsome, ostentatious, arrogant, and noble. It was as if he could wipe out an entire army with a single move. This was simply making people's blood boil. Was that their Adonis, Spadesy? Everyone held their breath. The cameras were all aimed at the youngster's face. However, there was a beep. Game account login failed. There was only one sentence on the screen. Your account or password is incorrect. This news was like a bucket of cold water, extinguishing everyone's enthusiasm. The amazement from before quickly faded from the audience's faces. It wasn't just the people in the stands. Even the commentator couldn't hide the astonishment in his eyes. Login failed. What was going on? Yin Wuyao and Feng Shang, who were already sitting in front of the computer, also turned around abruptly and looked at the young man's side profile. Chapter 222. Just when everyone was in a daze, a sneer suddenly came from the Fu family battle team. What are they doing? Someone even dared to impersonate Spadesy just to attract attention? Aren't you afraid of being kicked out? Impersonate. These two words were like a tornado that engulfed the entire esports arena. The audience did not want such a thing to happen, especially the haters. But if it wasn't an impersonation, then how could they explain the fact that the youngster couldn't log into the account? For a moment, everyone looked at Fujio differently. From the excitement just now to the suspicion now, there were even traces of disgust in the eyes of some people. Feng Shang panicked. You don't talk nonsense. The captain is Spadesy. Ha ha ha. I'm dying of laughter. There's actually a stutterer here? The people from the Fu family battle team didn't even bother to hide their laughter. Reward you with a punch of consumer delight? I didn't expect you to be like this in real life. How poor was the He family that they had to find a little stutterer to compete? Feng Shang didn't mind hearing those words. But when Manager Feng heard those words, he wanted to drag the speaker over through the glass and teach him a lesson. But before he could move, a loud bang was heard. The silver-haired youngster, who had been sitting in front of the computer, kicked his chair away. With one hand in his pocket, he stared coldly at the members of the Fu family and smiled evilly. Who are you calling a stutterer? What right does a person who betrayed his master have to bark? The young man's voice was very pleasant. It was slow and magnetic, and it grabbed everyone's ears as soon as he opened his mouth. After hearing Fujio's words, the man's entire face turned red. He clenched his fists and wanted to say something more. Fu Shiming stretched out his hand to stop him. His face was full of arrogance. There's no need to talk nonsense with someone who wants to impersonate me. Trying to impersonate him? Soon, someone caught the main point of Fu Shiming's words, and an uproar broke out again. What does young Master Fu mean? Could he be the real Spadesy? Thinking about it, the possibility of young Master Fu being Spadesy is very high. Hadn't the media previously reported that he had been internally selected by the Qin Corporation Club? Such a guess seemed to have been confirmed. Everyone began to look at each other in dismay. The audience's perception immediately leaned towards Fu Shiming's side. If that's the case, then Fujio is really shameless. You're shameless to the extreme, okay? Who could impersonate our big spade so easily? Shui Yaoyao looked at the condemning gazes directed at the youngster, which made her feel extremely uneasy. The saddest thing in the world was to be impersonated, and you still couldn't prove it was you. Little captain. It wasn't just Shui Yaoyao. Even the Uncle Yin Wuyao looked worriedly at the young man's side profile. As a mother, He Honghua's heart ached as she looked at the back of the man standing in the middle, who was despised by everyone. It was her baby. She knew her child better than anyone else. In the past, Jill was weak, had low self-esteem, liked to throw tantrums, and liked to throw money around. But her Gio would never impersonate anyone. Chapter 223. At this time, Fu Ximing was already sitting in front of his computer. With a click of his finger, he logged in and entered the game page directly. The light turned red. The record holder of 99 first kills. The first place in the ranking competition. The game ID that had countless glory appeared in front of everyone just like that. Spadesy. The audience shouted this name in unison. Their chests shook with unspeakable excitement. Fu Ximing curled up the corner of his lips in the cheers of the audience. What his mother said was right. The game ID Spadesy was worth spending a lot of money to hire someone to get it. But he really didn't expect that trash to be Spadesy. When Fu Gio logged in with this game ID just now, he was a little uneasy, until someone suggested impersonating him. Then he had a sudden inspiration, and came up with such a good idea. In the world of online games, whoever could log in with an ID was the real one. Fu Ximing stood up and glanced at Fu Gio coldly. When he bought the account, he didn't like this Spadesy. It turned out that there was a reason for his dislike. But now, he was going to use this game ID to completely ruin the He family army's reputation. What could Fu Gio do? She could only be anxious. Hee. The smile on Fu Ximing's face became wider. Old gamers like Feng Shang and Yin Wuyao knew at a glance that their captain's account had been tricked. Motherf ****. Yin Wuyao couldn't help but curse. He left the circle because of the unknown darkness. He didn't expect that when he came back, he would encounter such a disgusting thing right at the beginning. What should he do now? Little Captain was the one who suffered the most, right? Yin Wuyao always said that Fu Gio was a high school student, like an uncle. But now he really felt sorry for her. How could he not feel sorry? Those who knew Fu Gio were all annoyed. Just when the second wave of sarcasm was about to come, they heard a bang. The door that originally led to the top floor was kicked open by someone. Qin Mo, who was wearing a pure black uniform, suddenly appeared at the door. His long legs were straight, and his side profile was so handsome that he seemed to have walked out of a manga. Standing behind him was Secretary Liang, who was panting heavily. He called out worriedly, "CEO Qin. This is still a live broadcast. Even if you can't stand others bullying young Master Gio, you can't be impulsive." The audience fell into silence the moment Qin Mo appeared. Because no one expected Almighty Qin to come down. Although Qin Mo didn't say anything, the corner of his mouth curved coldly, and there was a strong chill in his eyes. With a flick of his finger, he threw the uniform into Secretary Liang's hand. It was obvious that he was going to do it himself. However, Fu Gio looked back at him with a deep gaze. She just looked at him quietly. Qin Mo stopped in his tracks. The two equally handsome men stared at each other, as if no one else was around. Apart from his handsomeness, there were also invisible sparks colliding. No one could understand the twists and turns within. But Qin Mo understood what the youngster meant. He wanted to do it himself. For this, Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fu Gio smiled as well. She touched her thin lips with her fingertips, and her left eye winked seductively. Chapter 224. Seeing that Almighty Qin went back, everyone was confused. What was going on? Logically speaking, Almighty Qin should have kicked whoever pretended to be Spadesy out. Why did he go back? Even Secretary Liang was a bit confused. Just now, CEO Qin's cold aura could almost freeze people's hearts. How come it seemed to have faded away so much? No, that's not right. Rather than saying it faded away, it was more like CEO Qin had suppressed the hostility in his eyes. Secretary Liang didn't think it was a good sign. Usually, the more silent CEO Qin was, the uglier he would die in the end. But what made Secretary Liang feel strange was that CEO Qin still had the patience to stand there and wait. The audience was puzzled as well. They turned to look at the esports arena again. In the midst of all the noise, that young man sat back in front of his computer calmly. His side profile was handsome and indifferent, as if he wasn't the one being despised. Fu Gio moved her slender fingers and twisted the black microphone on the side. She put it in front of her lips, and her silver hair fell down and covered her eyes. Then she laughed in a low voice. I didn't expect that my account would be hacked after a few days of not playing. But it doesn't matter. There is a good way to prove who is the real one. While she was talking, her hands were still typing on the keyboard. It was a real blind typing, and her fingers were so beautiful that people gasped. Damn, this person's hands are so fast. The commentator said this, and it wasn't hard to hear the amazement on his face. But it wasn't over yet. As Fujio's fingertips fell, the screen in front of her fell into darkness. Apart from a series of white codes, there was nothing else. What is this? Some people were shocked, and they couldn't believe what they saw. It's a network attack. He is doing a network attack on the spot. This is the first time I've seen a real network attack. It's so cool. Network attack. What do you mean? You don't even know this? He is hacking the official website of Hero. Wait a minute. It seems that not only the official website of Hero, but also the live streaming platform is under his control. Holy sh*t. That was way too awesome. Even if this person isn't Spadesy, I will still be his fan. This hacking skill is simply out of this world. Hacking skills? Are you saying that this person is a hacker? F***ck brother, look at the code. What's that jumping on the screen? Have some common sense. How can a hacker do this? No matter how excited the crowd was, Fujio's sitting posture was still very calm. She was still sucking on the lollipop, but it didn't affect her evil and cold voice at all. Everyone leaves their real information when they create an account. Although my information is hidden through special means, and no one can find out, even the officials can't see it. But all they need to do is touch the hidden data here, and everything will be revealed. The infiltration process was extremely fast. Before anyone could react, the young man had already pressed the enter key. The beautiful finger technique came to a screeching halt. The rhythmic clattering of the keyboard could no longer be heard on the court. Chapter 225. It was Fujio, not Fu Ximing. In an instant, everyone held their breath. Seeing this, those fans who claimed to love Spadesy and scolded Fujio shut up. Instead, some people who didn't say anything just now suddenly shouted, "My big Spade is so handsome." This was a direct acknowledgement of Fujio's identity. In fact, the audience who really liked Spadesy kept a low profile from the moment they entered the arena. They never believed that Fu Ximing was Big Spade. After all, they all remembered their idol's words. Big Spade had said that he would join the He group when he killed someone with one move in the last live broadcast. But the public opinion was distorted by some reports, which made people think that Fu Ximing might be Spadesy. They didn't understand why some fans didn't listen to their idol and believed in some baseless analysis. Are you sure you're a fan and not a hater? The support was very powerful. Just one sentence was followed by a large number of whistles. Fu Ximing didn't expect things to turn out like this. Attacking the official website on the spot and retrieving the registration information, he still felt that everything was a nightmare. Fujio, that sick loser. How could she be so powerful? Not to mention Fu Ximing's reaction. Even Feng Shang and Yin Wuyao didn't know that their captain could do this. Hacker. Such a mysterious profession wasn't even close to reality. Chen Xiaodong couldn't believe it. Their family's young master, who only cared about men, was actually a hacker. He Honghua's eyes were so shocked that she couldn't control herself. Her Jiao. That was her Jiao. In the midst of all the noise, Fujio stood up with one hand in her trouser pocket. Her posture was very cool. She looked at the Fu family team over there and raised her eyebrows with a smile. Just 3 words, but Fu Ximing's face turned pale. Even his lips lost their usual arrogance. The word embarrassment wasn't enough to describe his expression. But the camera was pointed at him, and everyone in the audience saw the embarrassment on his face. They thought that this was the end of the matter. But those fans who claimed to love Spadesy felt that Fujio's actions were not only a slap to Fu Ximing's face, but also to their faces. They started to make a fuss. Since you are a hacker, surely you can tamper with the official registration information? She wanted to prove that she was Spadesy with just a form? Hee, do you think we're that easy to fool? The real Spade fans almost had high blood pressure. Let me ask, do you really like Big Spade? Not here to defame him. We want the truth. When the self-proclaimed fan said this, he felt like a little angel of justice. Nothing else. Fu Ximing saw that the situation had taken a turn for the better, and his artificial voice rang out again. In this day and age, if you're a hacker, you can even turn black into white. Spade fans couldn't stand his attitude. They rolled up their sleeves and wanted to beat him up. At the same time, I'll pack up all those fake fans and throw them out through the window. Those comments stung my ears. Where was his intelligence? But at this moment Fujiu laughed. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be dyed with endless black mist. Fu Ximing, why are you in such a hurry? I didn't ask you to return the account. Chapter 226. Using a new account to compete? The referees looked at each other in shock. For so many years, no one had ever used a new account in the esports selection contest. There were too many limitations of a new account. After all, the top-level equipment in the game could only be used after reaching a certain level. Was this player planning to play in the ranking game without any equipment? But even so, there was no such rule in the rules. Because of the special situation, the referees had to look at the director's room, intending to talk to Manager Feng. Qin Mo's magnetic and deep voice sounded like a bottle of expensive red wine that had just been opened, exuding his unique grace. Let him use it. Being a man of few words was always in line with Almighty Qin's style. But the shoutcasters who knew their captain well felt their backs tighten. It seemed like their captain had never spoken up for anyone before. The two shoutcasters, who felt like they were spying on something, looked at each other, and without waiting for the referees to respond, they immediately said, "Okay, now let this player Fujio apply for a new account and get ready for the first match." It was a very straightforward opening match. A live broadcast needed to constantly generate topics, and it couldn't slow down the pace. Every team sat back in front of their computers. Which team would PK with which team, and the ranking game was random. They thought it was just a competition, but because of the identity of Spade Z, there was another topic to talk about. The big screen locked onto the list of the first duel. In this match, Fu Ximing and Fujio didn't fight each other. Instead, the group of people who admired Fu Ximing wanted to PK with the He family army. "Young Master Fu, let's go first. We'll help you teach this reckless kid a lesson. That little stutterer, and a has-been player, are just a little bit better on the ranking list. What can they do? Using a new account and still daring to compete?" That person sneered. His eyes fell back on the computer screen, and he typed rapidly to his teammates. "The new account is their weakness. Destroy them all." "Yes. Understood." The game screen officially turned on. Fujio put on her headphones with her fingers. Her fingers weren't on the keyboard, but she used one hand to move the mouse. The other team thought that a new account with no attack power would be taken down quickly. Who knew that when they all approached the game ID 9, awarding you a slap of pleasure in north of Een Mountain, appeared out of nowhere, and used their ultimate skills at the same time. Silver light exploded, and the team was instantly wiped out. It hadn't even been a minute since the battle started. There were still two people on the He family army's side who hadn't made a move, but the health of the person on the other side was already empty. Was there still a need to fight? The opponent's captain struggled to stand up. Een Shani Bey turned around and used up the last drop of his pen. Not only was the game being synchronized on the screen, but it was also synchronized with the person playing the game. That beautiful hand speed and counterattack was simply amazing. A has-been god. Little stutterer? Ha, I'll kill you. Yin Wuyao and Feng Shang had never had such tacit understanding before. They typed the same sentence at the same time. A gale of praises rang out in the arena. Chapter 227. Feng Shang was about to vomit blood when he heard that. He was never angry, but his face turned cold. "I can't accept your love." This was the first time he broke through his psychological barrier and shouted so loudly in public. Fujio tilted her head and glanced at him. Feng Shang thought that his idol was going to praise him, and he blushed. Unexpectedly, his idol patted him on the shoulder and smiled handsomely. So anger can cure stuttering. Feng Shang. Okay, get ready for the second round. Under Fujio's command, the He family army entered the game page. Fujio only moved around for the whole 3 rounds of ranking PK. But was it really as simple as it looked? Anyone who had played the game before would know that the most difficult part of the game was the details. How to move around without being swept by others. And how to move around without affecting the teammates' performance. Only a master could do that. The commentators were all professional players of the Qin Corporation. From what they saw, they could tell that Fujio was not a player who only knew how to leech experience. On the contrary, that young man didn't make a move, but once he made a move, even they couldn't be sure how good he was. But some fans were so arrogant that they firmly believed that Fujio was only here to leech experience. After 1 round, there were only 4 teams left. Finally, a line of words appeared on the screen. He Family Army PK Fu Corporation Team. The members of the Fu family were indeed very good. After all, they had received professional training. No matter how amazing Fujio's hacking skills were, they couldn't believe that the opponent was good at playing games. After all, they had been in the He Corporation for a long time. How could they not know what Fujio was like? And even if the opponent really knew how to play games, how could he beat them with a new account? They were not like the previous teams, who had been hiding their skills for so long. It was not a problem to control the north of Yin Mountain. Captain, someone typed to Fu Shiming. From the beginning, all the attacks were initiated by the north of Yin Mountain. Should we focus on him? Fu Shiming controlled the account of Spade Z and sent back and forth. I'll block, you guys cooperate. Pay attention to defense. Awarding you a slap of pleasure. Understood. Such a setup clearly showed that they didn't care about Fujio's new account. They didn't even care about Shui Yaoyao. Fu Shiming had bought a lot of top-notch equipment for today's rookie selection contest. He raised his long saber and rushed in the direction of north of Yin Mountain. Their plan was to kill north of Yin Mountain, then turn around and give awarding you a slap pleasure a stunning skill. Because once they made their move, the first person to save north of Yin Mountain was definitely awarding you a slap of pleasure. Someone else. In the He family army, other than these 2 who were worth dealing with, the other 2 only knew how to move slowly. There was simply no need to guard against them. Yin Wu Yao had also seen through his opponent's plan, and he immediately went into full defensive mode. You think you can stop me? Fu Shiming coldly laughed. Admit it, north of the Yin Mountain. You are already past your prime. You are just an old pro player who has lost all value. Even if you participate in the competition again, what can you do? Yin Wu Yao had to admit, when he heard this he did pause for a moment. Chapter 228. There was a clicking sound. A rhythmic tapping sound rose up. A clear and cold voice sounded in everyone's ears. Yao Yao, replenish Uncle Yin's blood. Yes. Shui Yaoyao's cooperation was also very good. This girl who was ignored by everyone tilted her mouse and released the potion in time. Fujio's voice was still there. Feng Shang, assist me. Yes. This meant that Fujio was not only controlling her own character, but she was also controlling the overall situation of the battle. Fu Shiming's people saw this and wanted to go back to deal with Shui Yaoyao. After all, if she healed north of Yin Mountain, the HP they just lost would come back. Who knew that before he could move his feet, a figure appeared in front of him. With the Geo symbol on it, the white robe spread out, and it was as if the wind itself had arrived. The speed at which he rushed up was too fast. Really too fast. That person didn't even see clearly who the person in front of him was. Fujio's slender hands danced on the black keyboard. With beautiful positioning and operation, a killing critical hit. The dazzling silver light filled the entire screen in an instant, creating a magnificent scene. That person who wanted to go back to defend saw his HP drop to the freezing point. He didn't even have the chance to heal himself before he fell down heavily. People who died in ranked matches couldn't be revived. That person looked at the black screen in front of him, threw the mouse in his hand, and arched his long legs forward unwillingly. How did he get hit just like that? However, to everyone's surprise, the young man's attack wasn't over yet. On the screen, when the silver light was about to end, Fu Jio waved the mouse in her hand and turned back to bite the incoming character. She did another absolute sweep. Holy sh*t. Yinhu, did you see that? His hands didn't even stop. The shoutcaster was so excited that he grabbed the arm of his friend next to him. The other shoutcaster, Yinhu, surprisingly didn't refute him. He looked at the screen in front of him seriously. Suddenly his eyes flashed. There's more. There's more. This is unheard of. Fu Jio had pure black headphones on her silver hair. Her eyes didn't even look at the keyboard. She only stared at the screen, with a lollipop in her mouth. Her left hand was on the keyboard, and her right hand was on the mouse. Generally speaking, the speed of an ordinary person's left hand would not be very fast. But to her, it made no difference whether she used her left hand or right hand. This was also the reason for this unprecedented chain of critical hits. Fu Ximing had no idea what was going on. He only saw a flash of silver light, and his HP dropped by more than half. He didn't expect to be greeted by another wave of silver light before he could even move. He manipulated Spade Z's account, but he didn't even lift his hand. There was a loud bang. Critical strike. Dominating the entire field, the silver light fell. Less than a minute after the start, two large words appeared on the screen. KO. Fu Jio was still smiling, devilish, handsome, and unruly. However, it was already over. From the moment Fu Jio put her hand on the keyboard, the ending was decided. The shock never stopped. The entire audience stared blankly at this scene. Not only in the live stream, but even the players in front of their screens were stunned. Their eyes and hearts were numb. Chapter 229. Such a scene seemed to be very familiar. The youngster didn't bring any equipment, and even used a new account, but he could destroy the entire team with one move. Looking at the past 10 years of competitions, only Almighty Qin could do that. This not only tested the player's skills, but also required the player to have a clear strategic layout in his mind. Almighty Qin was known as the most valuable professional player precisely because he had this kind of ability to control the entire field. Now there was this kind of amazing scene, and it was done by a newbie. This was enough to shock everyone. In fact, even Yin Wuyao didn't expect their team leader to be this good. He looked at the silver light, and the two characters that represented a complete victory on the screen. At that moment, the youngster's words came to Yin Wuyao's mind again. How is it enough to win an award? If you don't shock the esports world, why bother playing games? This time, not only the esports world of Jiang City was shocked, but even in the whole country, this kind of skill was top-notch. Especially that last roundhouse that showed how elegant it was to hit the enemy. It was really cool. Those anti-fans who were not convinced were all dumbfounded. That kind of technique was obviously Spade Z's most commonly used counterattack in dungeons. A person's identity could be faked, but the characteristics of this person's character couldn't be erased. And there were people who studied Spade Z's fighting style. If one didn't have a certain level of hand speed, they couldn't imitate it at all. They didn't know how to describe their inner feelings. They only felt the pain on their faces, and that kind of awkwardness was indescribable. Fu Ximing was in a daze the whole time. He was still looking at the screen where the silver light hadn't faded. He couldn't believe that they had been wiped out. Usually, every classic move of the winning side would be replayed on the big screen. This was something that happened in every single competition. However, only this time, when the ultimate move was replayed, even the commentator didn't come back to his senses. He just sat there with his eyes wide open. Whoosh! The whole stadium was filled with whistles. Many people stood up directly, waving their arms and hitting their support sticks loudly. Fu Ximing's face was unprecedentedly pale, without a trace of blood. He was still logged into his Spade Z account on the screen. That gray screen with this ID was very glaring. Everyone knew that a large part of the reason why Spade Z was liked by so many people was because he had never lost in the game. 99 consecutive wins. And as long as he played, he would get the first kill. And it was because of this record that he was so popular. But now, this godly ID with countless glory was in Fu Ximing's hands. and he didn't even have the power to fight back. In the end, it was already clear who was the real one. But it wasn't over yet. Chapter 230. After hearing this sentence, the uproar at the scene almost exploded. The number of clicks on all major online platforms broke 100 million. Everyone was leaving comments in the comments section. Even the platform technicians had never seen such a fast rate of comments. They were even worried that the network would go down. Cool. This is my big spade. I can KO you with a new account. I won't talk if I can do it. Where's the commentator? Play the replay and explain. The commentator has also become my big spades fangirl. I just want to ask you, who else is there? Who else is there? Open your eyes wide, those who are slandering my big spade. I've been waiting in front of the computer for a long time. As a middle-aged uncle, let me give you a scientific explanation. Only my big spade's hand speed can turn around and bite you. Do you understand? Fu Ximing, return my big spade's account. If you don't return it, I'll show you the strength of us hackers. These comments would appear on the live screen at the same time for better interaction online and offline. When the audience saw this, they were all very excited. Middle-aged uncle also likes my big spade? My big spade likes both men and women. He said they are hackers. I don't care. Anyway, return our big spade's account. Return it. In an instant, all the spade fans in the audience were asking Fu Ximing to return the account. The Fu family's team couldn't even sit still when they were in such an embarrassing situation. Fu Ximing himself clenched his fists, and his face turned white, and then purple. How could the media let go of such a scene? Of course, they would capture it immediately. Fu Ximing hurriedly used his hands to block, but the more he did so, the more embarrassing the scene became. Can't you have some manners? Why did you let him return the account to you? Some anti-fans couldn't accept this result, because once they admitted that Fu Jio was Spade Z, their words would become knives stabbing themselves. They still wanted to quibble, but as soon as they opened their mouths, they were suppressed. Shut up. Return the account. Don't think that a true Spade fan is easy to bully. When it's time to be tough, you won't be careless. One more word, and I'll throw you out. But at this moment, Fu Jio looked towards the audience and laughed. Her seductive skills and voice made people feel like they were in their bones. I don't need him to return it, I'll take it back myself. As she spoke, her finger moved, and an invisible dialog box appeared on the computer screen. She pressed the enter key. The machine in front of Fu Ximing seemed to be controlled by something invisible, and it began to jump with code that no one could understand. F***ck. While playing games, he could even plant a virus in the opponent. Let me ask you, how did you do it? I was only focused on Big Spade's ultimate move. Gosh, I request the officials to give me a super slow replay. It's useless to watch the replay. It's a technical problem to plant a virus in a game. My Big Spade's handsomeness surpasses the heavens. The commentators finally thawed. That was because Fu Jio's right hand moved the mouse, and her right hand quickly switched to another account. She logged back into the ID that made countless people who really liked esports, but couldn't get ahead through the system. Spade Z. Just like what the young man said. I don't need him to return it. I'll take it back myself. Not only was Spade Z on the screen, but there was also data showing that someone had changed the password of the ID Spade Z 2 days ago. Chapter 231. Fu Ximing's face was almost swollen. The shoutcaster, Yun Hu, had also come from the military courtyard. When he saw this, he couldn't suppress his instincts. He sneered into the microphone. I don't think I need to explain this part. The person who spent money to steal someone's account can leave now that he has been exposed. When the Fu family's team members heard this, not only their expressions, but even their movements were stiff. Out of so many esports competitions, they were the only team that was kicked out by the organizer. Not only that, such a large-scale esports live broadcast must have been watched by all the other teams, which meant that they had lost face all over the country. In the future, not only in Jiang City, but also in other cities, This would be their lifelong shame. The audience in the stadium would not give them face at all. If they only lost, they would get the respect of the loser. But Fu Ximing ignored the rules and thought that he was powerful. Not only did he steal someone else's account, but he also incited the media to impersonate them. The reason why gamers loved esports so much was that they could get fairness in Hero that they couldn't get in real life. In the past, background didn't matter here. As long as you were skilled enough, you could stand out. But in recent years, in the esports circle, there were some people who relied on their good looks to find others to play for them. Or they could become famous just because they were rich. This made some people feel discouraged. Fu Ximing's blatant actions had completely touched the bottom line. Many real Spade Z fans were worried about Fu Jiu in front of their computers, afraid that the young man couldn't prove himself. But in the end, the young man not only proved himself, it also proved one thing. As long as you had the ability, you wouldn't be afraid of rumors. Nobody knew when it started, but when people saw the idea of Spade Z, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. They didn't know when it started, but when they saw the idea of Spade Z, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. No one needed to say which team the champion would belong to. The three big words "He Family Army" dominated the 10 screens in the stadium, with Fu Jiu's beautiful and fair face and the slow-motion playback of her ultimate moves. No matter how many times they watched it, it was still too handsome. In the audience, He Honghua's round face was already covered in tears. She covered her mouth with her hands, afraid that she would cry. She had never told anyone about how she had led her life. Sometimes, she was so tired that she wanted to divorce Fu Zhongyi. In this world, there are too many people who will respect you because you have enough money, power, and culture. He doesn't care what you did. On the same occasion, she appeared with the three. She was just a village girl. She deserved to be robbed by that man. That third was a fairy who was praised by others, who asked her to not be as good-looking as him, and to have such a figure. He Honghua didn't like money, but she couldn't live without it. What about her Jiu? Once she filed for divorce, the company would lose her. What would happen to her Jiu in the future? She couldn't swallow her anger. He had to earn it back. However, all of her team members had been poached away at the last minute. She had been deserted by her friends and family, and she had been slandered by the public. Everyone wanted to step on her and make her completely bankrupt. He had really been discouraged before. In such a dark night, she had to travel from city to beg for help. She really wanted to cry. Even when the He family army appeared, she still thought that she would just treat it as her Jiu's happiness. But he had won. Chapter 232. He Honghua didn't know how to describe her feelings. She just looked at the tall and slender figure on the field with red eyes. In a mother's mind, the greatest happiness for her child was to be recognized. The background music of Hero sounded. All the members of the He family army stood up. Every one of them had very bright eyes. We have to admit that sometimes there was a kind of handsomeness that had nothing to do with appearance. It was a kind of aura that emanated from the inside out. For people of different heights, wearing the same uniform, stood side by side. The youngster was in the lead, and behind them were rows of glowing computer screens. All the cameras were aimed at one direction, the captain of the He family army, Fu Jiu. Just as some people expected, this youngster was going to be popular. The esports selection contest organized by the Qin Group was broadcasted nationwide. It wasn't over yet. Over there were reporters asking questions at the All-Star press conference. The question was from the ever-victorious team that suppressed the Supreme Alliance last year, the Xiangnan team. Almighty Xiao, I don't know if you paid attention to the selection contest organized by the Qin Group. The person called Almighty Xiao sat calmly. How can I pay attention when I'm here? Reporter, there's no way to continue this topic. I heard that there's a player called Spade Z over there. He destroyed the whole field as soon as he appeared. The man raised his eyebrows. There's such a thing. It's being broadcasted on all the online platforms. The reporter was already excited when he said this. He wanted to grab some news. After all, everyone knew that Xiangnan and the Supreme Alliance would have a tough battle in the national competition soon. If he could grab some news at this time and use it as a gimmick, it would definitely be a hit. The man just glanced at the reporter and then, "Oh, just an O? Tell me what you're feeling right now." The agent standing behind the man couldn't stand it anymore. He smiled like a Maitreya Buddha. "Xiao Jing, you can tell me more about your feelings." "Feelings?" Xiao Jing thought about it seriously and said, "Please broadcast this kind of esports competition on TV. I don't like the internet." Reporter, "You, an esports god, don't like the internet? I heard that Almighty Qin appreciates this Spade Z very much." The reporter saw that Xiao Jing was about to leave, so he had to use his big move. As expected, the man walked back, his face serious. "Tell me in detail, how did Qin Emo appreciate this newcomer?" Reporter, "Xiaoda, this is a press conference, not a small talk. You're paying so much attention to Almighty Qin. Aren't you secretly in love with him?" The people from the other teams saw it too. There were many players from the top 4 in the country. This Spade Z is not bad. Why don't you say that it's because his opponents are too weak? There will always be some loopholes in his attacks. It's just that his opponents didn't notice them. Anyway, we'll meet him in the national competition. Let's show him what real esports is like then. Of course, regardless of what was going on in the outside world, the golden trophy that symbolized first place was already in Fujio's hands. Regardless of whether they were professional or non-professional, all of the hero fans were watching this scene through the live stream. Chapter 233. In the beginning, some people were wondering why the young man wanted to go there. But when they came back to their senses, they remembered that Almighty Qin was there. Well, what was going on? In the distance, Qin Emo was wearing a pure black uniform. He was standing on 10 steps, and when he saw the young man walking towards him, his long and narrow eyes became more and more enchanting. His expression was still indifferent. Even now, he only raised his eyebrows slightly, full of an aura of abstinence. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. Not only the audience, but even the judges were stunned, because they never thought that the story would develop like this. What did the young man want to do by walking in front of Almighty Qin like this? In that instant, all the cameras shifted their positions and focused on the two of them. Secretary Liang, who was nervous, was also caught in the frame. He just wanted to pull young Master Jiu over and ask him what he wanted to do by doing this at this time. Didn't he know that there were cameras around? What if someone found out that our boss Qin might be gay? Chen Xiaodong basically had the same idea as Secretary Liang. He still hadn't forgotten why his young master played online games. It was all because of young Master Qin. Now, he was even more certain of this idea. However, neither Fujio nor Qin Emo cared about other people's opinions. The two of them were originally luminous, and when they walked together, the brilliance would be multiplied by 10 times. The young man had a slight smile on his face. He was handsome and attractive, and even through the screen, one could feel his youthful aura. His side profile was so clean that even the tiny hairs could be seen on the camera. What was different from the young man was the noble and domineering aura that Almighty Qin exuded. Two people, one on the stage, the other below, standing on the steps in the middle. Suddenly, it was as if all the lights ran into the young man's eyes, like a broken diamond, shining beautifully, because he was too handsome. When such a scene appeared on the screen in the form of a picture, people only felt that they were looking at a beautiful comic script. Fujio was still walking forward with a smile. The judges were wondering if Boss Qin would give the young man a look and let him experience it himself. He didn't expect this. Just as Fujio reached the last step, Qin Emo suddenly reached out his hand and pulled the youngster up. Fujio didn't hesitate. She took the force and leaned forward to smile. Her thin lips moved close to Qin Mo's left ear, and her voice was very melodious. "Brother Emo, you don't have to come down from the altar. I can just come up. How can I be worthy of you if I don't have the ability to wipe out the entire team?" What he said made people think too much. Chen Xiaodong covered his eyes when he saw the scene. Young master, what exactly do you want? You're flirting with Almighty Qin in front of the entire nation. Shui Yaoyao's heart trembled. She looked to her left, then to her right. The audience's jaws dropped. Your Highness Jiao, did you really not see the frown on Almighty Qin's face when you got close to his ear? The two commentators were also speechless. They had never seen their captain being flirted with like this before. Chapter 234. But this was exactly the kind of look that wanted to strangle the other person, but had a hint of indulgence and gentleness in his eyes. However, it was recorded by the camera. Apart from the audience present, there were also those Qin Mo fans watching the live broadcast. They were completely blown away. When had Almighty Qin ever smiled like this? So charming. The network that hadn't been paralyzed at any time just now had reached its limit. As Qin Mo curled his thin lips, he raised his hand, grabbed the young man's collar, and pulled him in front of him. The screen blurred. In an instant the comment section exploded. What's going on? It seems like the platform crashed. F***CK, where's the technology? Where's the platform technology? I want to see the follow-up. What was my Almighty Qin doing just now? What was he doing? What was he doing? Only the people who saw it at the scene knew. He grabbed the young man with one hand, and his smile was cold and seductive. I'll teach you a lesson later. Fujio was innocent. Why did she have to be taught a lesson? This kind of conversation was really so loving. There were many fujoshis at the scene, especially the girls who liked to play games, and they liked to match their Almighty with them. But they had never thought of matching Almighty Qin with anyone. After all, a person like Almighty Qin was like a flower on a high mountain, to be watched from afar and not to be messed with. The most important thing was that Almighty Qin was straight, the kind of straight as a pencil. No one dared to match him with anyone, for fear of being thrown into the cold palace by him. Even the esports reports only dared to say which team's female player Almighty Qin had met, and they didn't dare to directly say that they were friends, etc. Not to mention that there was a guy next to Almighty Qin. But now, seeing the young man standing in front of him, and Almighty Qin not forgetting to tidy his hair while teaching him a lesson, all the fujoshis' hearts popped out from seeing this scene. They were so compatible. They were a perfect match. Just when the excited audience took out their mobile phones to take pictures of the two of them, Chen Xiaobei's expression changed. The platform was still flooding with comments. Rolling around acting cute, hurry up and give us a follow-up. How to give them a follow-up? The technical staff was about to cry. The media, on the other hand, was overjoyed. They kept snapping photos from all angles and poses. Every single photo could be used as a page, and could even be privately circulated. Am I the only one who noticed that my big spade calls Almighty Qin brother Mo? Ah, in other words, the two of them have already met before? That's possible. That's why Almighty Qin came down just now, because he couldn't stand my big spade being bullied. No, you can't think like that. Almighty Qin is straight. Almighty Qin is still straight. The fangirls were going crazy. They also found it strange that watching the interaction between the two equally handsome people was even more heartwarming than when they themselves were in a relationship. What was going on? He Honghua was also wondering what was going on. She asked in a daze, Xiaodong, when did Jiu meet CEO Qin? Chen Xiaodong's tiger back trembled. Madam, don't worry. Young master is absolutely straight. He doesn't have any thoughts about young master Qin. He doesn't play games to chase after young master Qin. Young master's action just now wasn't a declaration of love. It was just a normal interaction. Yes, a very normal interaction. He Honghua didn't understand, and her face was full of confusion. The fangirls standing at the side suddenly realized. So my big spade is chasing after young master Qin. Chapter 235. But even without Chen Xiaodong's words, the atmosphere between Qin Mo and Fujio was a little too intimate. It was rare to see Qin Mo treat someone like this. No one knew what the young man said to him with a smile. Almighty Qin reached out and pulled the zipper of the young man's uniform up to his head, taking care of the young man. as if he was taking care of his younger brother. Fu Jiu looked down at Almighty Qin's hand, with a lollipop in her mouth. Her clean side profile was so handsome that it made people want to scream. Two equally outstanding people standing together was really pleasing to the eye, not to mention their actions were so ambiguous. Many fangirls already knew that from today onwards, they would have another pair of CP fans, and they couldn't be happier. But those who played esports knew that it was the mutual admiration between two masters. No one could predict the future of the young man. Although the Supreme Alliance was the king of Jiang City, they hadn't won the national championship for 3 years in a row. Although Almighty Qin was known as the most valuable esports player, he was a single player. The final victory of the national competition was determined by team combat. Moreover, the level of the professional teams in the country wasn't like today's, where they could be destroyed by one person. But no one could deny that the Supreme Alliance, which had Almighty Qin and had absorbed Spadesy, was very strong. No one knew. Everything in the future was unknown. When Fu Jiu led the He family army and stood in the Supreme Alliance, Feng Shang was the most excited other than Shui Yaoyao. He looked at Feng Yi, who was walking towards him, and his eyes were red. He took the honor from his brother's hands, and his back was straight. Feng Yi had so many things to say to his brother, but in the end this manager, who could make all esports players famous, just walked past him and went to the next player. Because Feng Yi was very clear that this honor should be given to Feng Shang cleanly. Even if it was mentioned in the esports circle one day, no one would say, "Look, he became famous because of his brother. In fact, he is just a stutterer." The person who chased after his pants when he was young had grown up. At this moment, Feng Yi finally believed that even without his protection, his brother could still stand out from the crowd. Fu Jiu was of course the last speaker. Under the bright lights, the youngster held the glittering gold trophy in his hand and glanced at the other three standing beside him. Facing the camera, he suddenly smiled. "I want to give this trophy to my mother. Because of me, she has broken her heart too many times. Because of her poor background, she was ridiculed by others. She moved from city to negotiate with sponsors. Finally, she managed to preserve the company's qualifications and form a team. That's why we can come here. So I want to give this trophy to her mother." "No problem," the three of them shouted loudly and looked in He Honghua's direction. He Honghua covered her mouth and cried tears of joy. Fu Jiu's eyes darkened, and her silver hair fell down. "Finally, we used to be looked down upon, and even when we worked hard, we were questioned." He wanted to use this as a general to tell some people, "My team members have never been out of breath." In an instant, thunderous applause rang out. Yin Wuyao, Shui Yaoyao, and Feng Shang looked at each other, walked together, and lifted Fu Jiu up. "If there really was a king in this world, in that case we will be your loyal subjects." Chapter 236. Supreme Alliance's new team was formed. There were a total of 11 people. Qin Mo stood in the middle. The team members lined up in a row. Every one of them was in their uniform, looking indescribably handsome. That surging aura was just like the slam dunk that had swept the world of anime and manga back then. It swept over and ignited people's hearts. Such a scene was broadcasted on all major online platforms at the same time. Many fangirls couldn't help but want to play hero again after watching it. At this time, in the lounge of the business reception, Fu Zhongyi's arm was held by a well-maintained woman. She was wearing a woolen coat that cost tens of thousands of dollars. Her makeup was exquisite, and her other hand was holding a wine glass filled with red wine. She was smugly clinking glasses with the investor. "Director Li, you really have a good eye for choosing our Fu's battle team. There wasn't a man who didn't like to be praised by a beauty, especially Mr. Li." He laughed and waved his hand. "Speaking of foresight, Mr. Su's foresight is still the best. You've poached so many worthy members. After this selection contest, once the name of the Fu's battle team spreads, our good days will come. President Fu, I'm so envious that you have such a good wife." Fu Zhongyi glanced at Su Mei, who was standing beside him. His expression was one of superiority, CEO Lee was never stingy with his praises for his business partners. And young master, you're really good at gaming. Honestly, there was a period of time where I really believed he Honghua, thinking that Spade was there. That was really hilarious. I know, right? Sume pretended to sigh regretfully. It's really hard to say about big sister Honghua. Sometimes, I don't want to make things difficult for everyone. Zhongyi understands me, but she just can't get along with me. Fu Zhongyi sneered. That's true. Why do you care about her? Actually, I don't care about my status. Sume looked at Fu Zhongyi, and her voice gradually became softer. Her eyes turned red. But Ximing is so outstanding, and he has always been criticized by others since he was young. Just because he is 7 months behind Ximing, I really can't bear to. Hearing that, Fu Zhongyi's heart softened. He reached out and pulled his wife into his arms, gently patting her. After this selection contest, let's see if He Honghua still has the capital to delay the divorce. You don't have to worry about the others. My Fu family only recognizes our Ximing family. As for the others, it's fine even if we don't want that kind of trash. Mr. Lee was not interested in listening to this kind of family infighting. He was a businessman, and what he cared most about was the interests of businessmen. Today is a good day. Don't mention unhappy things. The Qing Group's competition should be over by now. President Lee said and smiled again. President Fu, shall we go down now? I believe that many of our friends from the media are waiting to interview us, especially some advertisers. After watching this year's selection contest, they will definitely keep coming. Mr. Lee is right. Sume knew what kind of person she was. She definitely knew that in this circle, she had to take advantage of the situation. She said coquettishly, "Hubby, hurry up and smile. Think about how Ximing made us proud, so that we can accept the interview later." Chapter 237. In the center of the cocktail party, a red carpet was spread all over the floor, showing off the nobility. There were indeed many people there, all of whom were business celebrities in Jiang City. In the magnificently decorated hall, everyone was holding a glass of wine, talking about something with amazement on their faces. And the words selection contest could be vaguely heard. Sume walked down the spiral staircase holding Fu Zhongyi's arm. When she saw the scene, her thin lips curved into a smile. Her prediction was right. As long as he had the identity of Spadesy, her son would be famous. With this certainty, Sume walked down the stairs quite confidently. The waiters in suits were still busily shuttling among the crowd. When people saw Fu Zhongyi and Sume coming down, the voices of conversation stopped abruptly. After all, they were all people in the business world, and they had been here for a long time. Naturally, they wouldn't show their expressions, so they naturally changed the topic. However, their eyes would involuntarily look at Fu Zhongyi's side. Being stared at like that, Sume's attitude became even higher. She turned sideways to let the waiters pour her wine, and then she blended into the crowd. Boss Lee was also smiling happily, thinking that in less than a minute, someone would definitely come over to talk to them. The three of them looked at each other with confidence. Sume even pretended to raise her glass and take a sip of red wine, with a big smile on her face. Who knew? 1 minute passed. 2 minutes passed. 3 minutes passed. Still no one came over. There were reporters taking pictures of them, but the feeling of taking pictures like that was very strange, not like a formal shooting. It was a little hard to describe. Usually, if someone came to interview them at this time, they wouldn't refuse. Why did they hide? Boss Lee frowned, feeling a little awkward, but he couldn't tell what it was. Things didn't develop for a long time, so Sume couldn't help but feel a little anxious. After all, the purpose of attending this cocktail party was to make friends with more advertisers tonight. It couldn't go on like this. Others didn't move, but Sume moved. She held her glass and came to the side of an investor who had been eyeing the esports project recently. "Boss Lu, long time no see." That Boss Lu glanced at her and didn't say anything. Sume continued to smile. "I wonder if you have watched this year's selection contest?" "I didn't look." Boss Lu's words were also very artistic. But after seeing the pictures in the moments, I plan to go home and watch the replay. I heard that there is a player called Spadesy who is not bad. When Fu Zhongyi and Su Mei heard him mention Spadesy, their smiles grew wider. Fu Zhongyi enunciated each word carefully. My son is untalented, but it is his good fortune to be able to catch Boss Lu's eye. Boss Lu took a sip of wine and didn't say anything, tacitly acknowledging his modesty. On the other hand, the people at the side quieted down when they heard the conversation. But at this moment, the reporters all raised their cameras, looking like they wanted to steal the limelight. Chapter 238. After saying this, Su Mei made a moved expression, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What a good acting! Unexpectedly, Boss Lu raised his eyebrows. Who told you that Spadesy is your son Fu Ximing? Ah! Su Mei was stunned by this rhetorical question. She stood there, not knowing what to do. Not only that, but her expression was also synchronized with the camera. Fu Zhongyi and Mr. Li were confused. If Spadesy wasn't Ximing, who else could it be? President Fu. Although it's not convenient for me to say anything as an outsider. A man should be responsible. In today's society, which man doesn't have children outside? It's just that it's rare for the second son to ride on the eldest son's head. Mr. Lu's voice was very calm, and he was still holding a glass of wine in his hand. What everyone found strange was that, logically speaking, CEO Lu was a well-behaved CEO. He would definitely not say such things in such an occasion. Could it be that he was drunk? After all, Boss Li was the middleman. He opened his mouth, wanting to speak up for Fu Zhongyi. Boss Lu, you don't understand. Boss Fu's eldest son is really unpresentable. He doesn't have anything he wants. And yet he acts all high and mighty. Rumor has it that he likes men. Isn't he a pervert? No matter how magnanimous President Fu was, he could not tolerate his son being like this. Can't take it out? Boss Lu didn't answer his question, and just asked with a smile. At this time, the quick-witted Su Mei finally realized that something was wrong, and was about to say something. But it was too late. At this point Manager Li blurted out, Yes. The useless Fu Jiu you're talking about is Spadesy. Boss Lu put away the wine glass. Boss Fu, your two sons are indeed very different. The former is very skilled, while the latter only knows how to hack accounts. Fortunately, they are competing in the esports arena, not using tricks like a mistress. Boss Su, you two are really addicted to pretending to be others. Your son pretended to be others in the competition, and you still pretended to be others at the banquet. Boss Fu likes you. It really is a perfect match. All of a sudden, not only Su Mei, but even Fu Zhongyi's face froze. His cheeks turned white and then red. Only they knew how they felt. The surrounding people also laughed after hearing Mr. Lu's words. As for what everyone was laughing at, everyone knew very well in their hearts. Su Mei had never been so humiliated in all her years of life. She had graduated from a famous university, and was also a radio host. She knew exactly how to control public opinion. So, even when she had snatched the man from He Honghua, no one had said a word about it. But today she had slapped her own face. As for Fu Zhongyi, his mind was blank. Actually, he had no idea that Fu Ximing was impersonating Spadesy, which explained his reaction. What's more, what did Director Lu just say? That eldest son of his was Spadesy. As an investor who had taken drastic measures against He Honghua at the last minute, he was even more confused. Spadesy is He Honghua's son. How is this possible? Manager Li said anxiously. Manager Lu, is the information you got wrong? Chapter 239. Hearing that, Boss Li immediately took out his cell phone. Fu Zhongyi also went over there. The entire online platform was promoting the topic of Fujio. The young man had one hand in his pocket, standing in the Supreme Alliance. Not only was he not overwhelmed by the aura, but the image of him with a lollipop in his mouth gave a strong impact. The most valuable king of popularity. The first kill weapon with an incredible face. Spadesy, These were all titles given to Fu Jiu by the Qin group. Every title was like a slap on Fu Zhongyi's face. In addition to the news of Fu Jiu winning the championship, there was also a photo of the Fu family team being kicked out of the arena. And there was a bold sentence in pure black font. In the esports arena, there is no need for this kind of imposter. Sume also saw that photo. The scene where her son raised his hand to block the camera made her clench her teeth. How could this be? How could things turn out like this? She had obviously spent a lot of money to find a hacker to steal the ID of Spade Z from the internet. It should be Ximing's. And how could that barbaric village girl's useless son be the real Spade Z? There were too many questions, and Sume almost couldn't help but want to smash the cell phone on the spot. Fortunately, she still had some sense left, and she knew that she couldn't make a fool of herself on such an occasion. However, when she raised her head, she saw that everyone was looking at her, and that there were cameras taking pictures of her. This made Sume pull Fu Zhongyi over, and they fled the scene without thinking. That stumbling back was full of embarrassment. However, this was the only way he could save his last shred of face by not saying anything. Because there was already a media reporter who couldn't help but say, "Boss Fu, don't go. Tell us, what do you think of your second son pretending to be your eldest son?" "Boss Su, the Fu family team was established by you. Don't you know anything about your son pretending to be Spade Z?" But looking at the reaction at the scene, it shouldn't be. Su Mei and Fu Zhongyi were no longer in the mood to say anything, and they just wanted to leave as soon as possible. When she rushed out, Su Mei's face was scratched. It hurt so much that she frowned, but she didn't dare to say a word. Mr. Li was the only one left at the reception. He was still scrolling through the messages on his phone. Those small platforms that invested in the He family army actually exceeded the number of visitors of their platforms in an instant. Moreover, it had exclusive rights to broadcast Spade Z's personal interview. The word regret was not enough to describe Manager Li's mood. He thought he would make a fortune. Now, because of Fu Ximing pretending to be Spade Z, not only did he have to withdraw all the publicity he had invested, but he also had to face the danger of the company collapsing. Boss Li's face turned pale as he held his phone in a daze. The scene of He Honghua begging him appeared in his mind. "Manager Li, I know that businessmen value profits. We've known each other for a long time. Please don't withdraw your investment at such a critical moment, okay? I can't break down. If I do, my son will be finished." How did he answer then? Chapter 240. Now his company's reputation was about to go bankrupt, and He Corporation had become the darling of all the major advertisers. Any businessman would know that. Now it was hard for He Corporation not to become famous. The new king of esports, Spade Z, who was the one who gave He Honghua the idea to play such a beautiful trick. Boss Li clenched the phone in his hand, and his heart felt like it had turned over a bottle of dye. He wished he had never withdrawn his investment. Boss Lu walked past him and said, "Businessmen value profits, but they also need to know not to be ungrateful." Boss Li was shocked. Boss Lu didn't say anything else. He looked at the three people who had different endings and walked to a quiet corner. Then he took out his phone, swiped the screen, and returned the call. On the top floor of the Qin group, Qin Imo glanced at his phone that kept vibrating. His eyes met the young man's, and he pressed the call button calmly. Boss Lu didn't waste any time and smiled. "Boss Qin, I've done everything you asked for, and the results are pretty good." Those three people wanted to find a hole to hide in. Since the media was here, I didn't have to do much, and they would lose face if they did whatever they wanted. "Yeah, got it." Qin Mo's voice was very calm. He held his phone in his left hand, but he didn't forget to empty his right hand. He walked around the young man, pushed his hairy head, and asked him to sit over there. Almighty Qin was still talking on the phone at this time. How busy was he? Boss Lu was still talking on the other side, and he asked vaguely, "Boss Qin, does this Su Mei have any grudges with you?" "No." Qin Emo reached out to toss his uniform to the side before turning on one of the computers. Boss Lu smiled and said, "I think so too." Sume wasn't stupid enough to make life difficult for anyone but Boss Chin. But if they didn't have any grudges, why would CEO Chin call him during the game just now and ask him to stay at the party and wait for Sume and the others to talk to him? With Boss Chin's intelligence, he should have already guessed that they would have such a reaction. It was so embarrassing to say such a thing in front of so many people. But Boss Chin just had him wait here. He didn't believe that it wasn't intentional. Since there's no conflict then, President Liu wanted to clarify, afraid that one day he would accidentally fall into the trap. Chin Mo's side profile was handsome, and he retracted his arm from Fujio's side. His deep eyes emitted a cold light. I'm a person who likes to protect my own. Director Liu, do you understand? What does this have to do with protecting his own people? Could it be? President Liu thought about it, and could only think of one possibility. President Chin was avenging someone? However, no matter what the reason was, Chairman Chin's move was too ruthless. Others didn't hear what Secretary Liang said, but Secretary Liang did. He was very, very worried. If his intuition was right, this call from the CEO was definitely related to the young man. President Chin, tell me, who did you hurt for young Master Jiao? Chin Mo kept his phone as though no one was around. He fiddled with it and glanced sideways at the youngster sitting not far away. Finally, he was completely by his side. From now on, he should be able to live a little more peacefully. It's very important, and I have to write it here. School Hunk doesn't allow authorization. Any reprinting, adaptation, or other infringement is my bottom line, and I will go through legal procedures. Chapter 241. The Supreme Alliance was a godlike existence to the people who played esports. It was a pleasant surprise for everyone to be able to join them and sit at the top of the Chin group to control the game characters. Among the four of them, Shui Yaoyao came from a difficult background. There were some things that she didn't even tell His Highness Jiao. Her family didn't approve of her playing games. Especially for a family like Shui Yaoyao's. They couldn't accept such a new profession, not to mention that she was still a high school student. Playing games would undoubtedly delay her studies. Every time she came out to meet with His Highness Jiao and the others, she would suffer from some rumors. Most of them were from relatives. Whether it was concern or mockery, they all said the same thing. How can she go to university if she's so poor? Let her work as soon as possible to lighten her burden. Letting her run around like this will only make her lose money. Someone even said to her mother, why should a girl play games? Hooking up with people online. Isn't she afraid of losing her reputation? Shui Yaoyao's mother had a weak personality, but she loved her child dearly. Yaoyao isn't that kind of person. She will play professionally in the future. Professionally? That person didn't understand esports at all. There are professionals in games? To make money. Wake up. That's something that only happens on TV. What does your Yaoyao have? She doesn't have a face, she doesn't have skills, and she's so fat. Who would play games like this? Her mother always thought that she didn't hear such words. However, every time she leaned against the door with red eyes, Shui Yaoyao would tell herself, she must have a bright future. She must get a good result, and she must advance. Now she was finally sitting here. Shui Yaoyao held the mouse in her hand and looked at the members of the Supreme Alliance beside her. Her fingers were shaking. Fujio sat next to her. After glancing at her, she took out a bank card from her coat pocket. Then, she put it in front of Shui Yaoyao with a light smile. Shui Yaoyao was stunned by Fujio's action. She looked sideways at the young man's fair and handsome face and opened her mouth. His Highness Jiao, the prize for the first place in the rookie contest. The password is 6 9s. Fujio took a sip of Coke and held the can casually. Her thin lips were filled with tenderness. Yaoyao paused and pushed it back. No, I can't take it. This award was given by His Highness Jiao, so it should belong to His Highness Jiao. Yaoyao, what are you thinking? Fujio smiled knowingly. If it weren't for you, a healer and a distraction, I wouldn't have been able to kill them all. At this point, Fujio sat back and said evilly, what's more, do you think I lack money? Shui Yaoyao thought about Highness Jiu's behavior in school. Every now and then, he would buy something to show off his wealth. He was indeed a nouveau riche. Or do you think that Manager Feng's brother is short of money? When Fu Jiu asked this, she glanced at Feng Shang, who was still chattering in front of Feng Yi. Yao Yao shook her head. The entire Jiang city knew that the Feng family was rich. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.